Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 7, Episode 17, Hot Stuff.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Hot Stuff.
We open at Arnold's, which is pretty much empty.
Not a bad crowd tonight. At least last night there were 2 people dancing.
Al reveals to Richie, Potsy, and Ralph that he made Chachi an executive for his ideas on how to attract more customers. Al goes into the kitchen, and Chachi goes to hit on Joni. And surprisingly, when he asks her out this time, he gets a maybe.
Al, guess what? I got a maybe!
She tells Richie all of the other girls think Chachi's really cute, and if she doesn't snatch him up, one of them will. Ralph wants to leave Arnold's for another place, one that actually has women, scandalizing Richie and Potsy.
Are you telling me you'd leave Al for women?
In the blink of an eye.
Richie says if they leave Arnold's, Fonzie will leave Arnold's, and then no Arnold's.
Wow, it happened so fast.
Ralph protests that that's already happened. Fonzie arrives as Ralph is about to leave, and then Al comes out of the kitchen. He's surprisingly understanding, saying that he's become a burden anyway.
If I was you, I'd go to Merlin's pub, too. In fact, Jermaine is there right now, probably dancing with every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Fonzie has a plan to pack Arnold's, though. Every night at 10, Fonzie will perform a motorcycle stunt. He'll climb onto the roof. Ralph will ride his motorcycle past, he'll jump off, and Fonzie will jump on. No one else thinks this idea is good.
Jumping off the roof? You'll miss! Maybe the first night, but I'll get the hang of it.
Nevertheless, Al feels inspired, and he's going to go home and think of something. He tells Chachi to lock up and turn off the grill. Fonzie takes Ralph and Potsy into his office to think of more ideas, as Richie has a date for Lori Beth's birthday.
A very happy B-Day to you. I'll see you later. Gentlemen, conference time.
Chachi leaves with Joni, forgetting something that he was supposed to do as smoke rises from the grill. Inside the men's room, Potsy proposes they invite President Kennedy to Arnold's to dance with girls, or put more pennants on the walls. Ralph opens the door to see Arnold's is now on fire. As Ralph and Potsy panic, Fonzie tries to stay calm, puts on his motorcycle helmet, and tries to knock down the bathroom wall to escape.
I'm gonna go out the back door.
There's no back door!
Well, there's gonna be when I'm finished with it.
Only problem is, it's concrete, and Fonzie is knocked unconscious. Ralph and Potsy see Richie's car from the window and shout for help. Only problem is, he's too far away and too busy making out with Lori Beth to hear their cries.
Rich,
What?
I thought I heard something.
Oh, that's my heart pounding.
Luckily, Lori Beth notices that Arnold's is on fire, and Richie works out a plan. Attaches chain to the window and car, and drive away. The window is yanked off, and Potsy and Ralph are able to get Fonzie out, and then themselves.
I guess everything's all right. Yeah. Except for Arnold's.
The 5 of them watch Arnold's descend into flames. Later, the gang sits in the burned-out ruins of their hangout spot.
I can't find the initials I carved anymore.
Al arrives, having just gotten back from the insurance company.
They practically called me a crook.
They concluded it was an inside job, because they found a burned-up apron on the grill, and they knew business wasn't good. Chachi admits that he forgot to turn off the grill, and he's sorry. Fonzie is furious. Al trusted Chachi with his life, and Chachi burned it down.
Fonz, it was an accident.
No, accidents just happen. This is your fault. You caused this.
Chachi runs away. Al wants to go home to Kenosha, but Richie suggests that Al take the money and build a new place. Al says the insurance money won't be enough to build the kind of place that can compete now, so he's going back to Kenosha.
I think it was a message from up there about this burning down.
Could be.
At the Cunningham house, a going-away party is being held in Al's honor. After they finish singing for He's a Jolly Good Fellow, Al assures them he'll be back to visit.
But he waved goodbye, saying, "Don't you cry, I'll be back again someday."
Chachi is trying to get in touch with Fonzie, who is late to the party. When Fonzie does show up, he's brought a present. Enough money for Al to fully reopen Arnold, from Fonzie's savings, having been working since he was 6.
You mean partners?
Only if you want to, otherwise consider it a loan.
Oh, no, partners is wonderful.
Since Fonzie would be investing in Arnold's, he assigns Chachi to be his representative, believing that Chachi has learned his lesson. Al declares they're going to rebuild Arnold's, everyone toasts, and Al and Fonzie call each other partner.
Thank you, Peter. That was Hot Stuff. It first aired back on January 22nd, 1980. Happy Days was followed that night by the premiere of a new nostalgia-based Gary Marshall sitcom, Good Time Girls. This was about 4 women sharing an attic apartment in Washington, D.C. during World War II. The cast includes Annie Potts, Georgia Engel, Lorna Patterson, Adrienne Samed.
We're the performers you thought were dead, like Bonnie Franklin and Adrienne Samed.
Scolari and Sparky Marcus. ABC gave the show a big promotional push, but it lasted just 13 episodes, one of which never even aired. CBS had a new episode of The White Shadow. In this episode, Coach Reeves joins a country club only to learn that the club discriminates on the basis of race.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
Why are people always surprised when country clubs discriminate on the basis of race? I feel like that's kind of the unspoken thing that all country clubs do.
That's an incredible. I think I'm going to have a heart attack and die from that surprise.
And NBC offered its viewers a new episode of The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. In this one, Deputy Perkins believes he has won the Irish sweepstakes. Meanwhile, Lobo gets swindled by a con man, so he and his deputies plan revenge. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I'd honestly probably stick with Happy Days for this one because it's about Arnold's getting burned down. You gotta watch that.
Yeah, I guess I would probably be obligated to watch this episode. And I would be curious to see what Good Time Girls was like. Have you ever tried to watch any episodes of that show?
I feel like I did at one point. I know that I've seen the theme song a bunch of times. If I did, I don't think I liked it very much because I would remember it more.
I would say that is a fair assessment. I tried to enjoy the Good Time Girls, but it just wasn't clicking with me, and I can see why it didn't click with audiences. I think it takes a little bit too much explaining to tell you what it's actually about. In the premiere, they go on and on about what the premise of the show is, and it just doesn't click the way a hit sitcom should. Hot Stuff was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by our pal, Fred Fox Jr. The most recent of Fred's episodes that we covered was The Mechanic. As for guest stars in this episode, there are none, but we do have some songs. We hear Poison Ivy by the Coasters, with lyrics this time. We also hear Theme from a Summer Place by Percy Faith and Blue Moon by the Marcells on the car radio when Richie and Lori Beth are making out. And this actually turns into kind of a haunting sequence. Richie and Lori Beth are making out, and you hear Blue Moon on the radio. And meanwhile, Potsy and Ralph are trapped in this burning bathroom and screaming for their lives through the bars.
Am I a bad person if I thought that part was kind of funny?
I guess there is some very dark humor in the fact that Richie is completely oblivious to what's happening. Meanwhile, Ralph and Potsy are screaming for their lives through these prison-like bars on the windows, which also brings up the fact that Arnold's was apparently a death trap this entire time.
As much as this whole thing is obviously all Chachi's fault, I feel like maybe Al should have been doing more to keep his restaurant safe. But also, on the other hand, this is the 1960s, and I imagine that safety codes were considerably lesser then. Seatbelts had just been introduced. So I don't have much faith that the rest of the industries of America were much better.
People got hurt back then.
Last but not least, we hear For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. It's performed by the entire cast.
For he's a jolly good fellow. For he's a jolly good fellow.
This song has been used in a number of other episodes, including Spunkless Spunky, Graduation Part 1, Fonzie the Father, and Football Frolics. The melody goes back to France in the 1700s. But the familiar English lyrics were not written until the 1800s.
The reason why it was used in TV and movies for so long is because for decades, Happy Birthday was under copyright. So if you used it, you had to pay the copyright holders. Every time that there's a birthday party on TV, they just use For He's a Jolly Good Fellow instead because that's not copyrighted. But in 2015, the copyright on Happy Birthday expired, so now you can use it whenever you want, folks.
As for cultural and historical references this week, Al says that business hasn't been too gung-ho lately.
Business has not been too gung-ho lately.
In 1986, Ron Howard actually directed a movie called Gung-Ho with a screenplay by Happy Days writers Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel.
Paramount Pictures presents Michael Keaton.
Whoa, yikes!
In a Ron Howard production, Gung-Ho.
That's awful.
Looking at the summary, it sounds pretty racist.
And it's all in the hands of Ron Howard, the director of Splash and Cocoon.
This is great.
What could possibly go wrong?
Good question. Let's go find out.
Gung-ho is an expression that dates back to World War II. It was used by Marines to mean enthusiastic, especially for warfare. It comes from the Chinese word gong-he, meaning to work together. There are a number of real-life businesses, by the way, called Merlin's Pub, but none of them are in Milwaukee, so don't go looking for it.
I'm leaving Arnold's. I'm going to Merlin's Pub.
Al compares himself to a 1957 Edsel.
A 57 Edsel in the showroom of life.
Once again referencing the financially disastrous line of automobiles from the Ford Motor Company. The thing is, there are no 1957 Edsels. The first model year was 1958.
This is the 1958 Edsel, the car that presents originality and elegance never seen before in any car at any price.
The last model year was 1960, which gives you some idea of how Edsels went over. Richie and Fonzie briefly discuss English mathematician Sir Isaac Newton, whom Fonzie credits with discovering gravity.
What about that guy that discovered gravity?
Isaac Newton.
Exactamundo.
I'm pretty sure the earliest cavemen discovered that things fall down rather than up, but Sir Isaac was the one who wrote the law of universal gravitation. The story of an apple falling on his head is apocryphal, but Newton did observe apples falling to the ground from trees and wondered why they fall straight down rather than sideways or in any other direction. Al compares himself to a dodo bird. The dodo was a flightless bird that lived east of Madagascar and went extinct in the 1600s. It is best known today as a symbol of obsolescence. The extinct bird was made famous by Lewis Carroll's 1865 children's novel, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
During the scene where Alice has just been shrunk down and she's having the caucus race with a whole bunch of other small birds and mammals, the dodo bird is there.
Land ho, by Jove!
Where am I, Dodo?
Dodo?
Al says he's going back to Kenosha, which is Al Molinero's actual hometown, and there are regular buses between Milwaukee and Kenosha. It's about an hour and a half due south on I-94 by bus, but it's only an hour if you drive yourself.
Al, if you miss the bus, I'll drive you.
So not a bad drive at all. And Fonzie says, Chindan.
Two Italians.
Chindan.
This is Italian-American slang. It's a toast that basically means, I hope you live another 100 years.
Oh, I like that. A nice little piece of ethnic pride.
It is. It comes from the Italian cent'anni, meaning 100 years. Other observations this week, the destruction and rebirth of Arnold's is something that the show's producers had been discussing in the press for quite a while before this episode appeared. Apparently, they wanted to emphasize the fact that Richie and his friends were growing up, and they wouldn't want to go to a teen hangout anymore.
There are only high school girls here. You know I can't survive without women. I mean, what are we still doing here?
What do you think about this destruction of Arnold's and the rebuilding of Arnold's?
I don't know. I guess it kind of makes sense that they'd want to do something to keep eyes on the show, but also, I guess it just feels like a shame because Arnold's has been with us for such a long time.
I would say that the new Arnold's is not drastically different other than being uglier than the previous Arnold's. And in fact, even into the 11th season, the patrons at Arnold's tend to be high school kids still. You know when Fonzie is teaching and he has this group of students who kind of become semi-regulars on the show?
Arnold's is still a regular hangout spot.
Yeah, so I don't know that this really accomplished all that much, but I understand why they did it because they were getting a lot of criticism in the press at the time from people saying, how can you have Ron Howard still playing a teenager in high school after 7 seasons? Of course, he wasn't still playing a teenager in high school. His character had gotten older and had grown up, but the show's look maybe didn't reflect that. So unfortunately, Arnold's had to be sacrificed to appease the critics. But one thing that I resent about this episode is that it shows Arnold's as being deserted by the local kids. As recently as last week, it was doing fine. They set up that Arnold's is failing and nobody goes there anymore, so it's kind of a mercy killing.
It was a mercy killing.
When it gets burned to the ground. But I didn't feel that that was fair or accurate because just last week, the place was doing great business. So what happened?
Happy Days plays fast and loose with its own continuity.
The studio audience squeals when Scott Baio enters.
Hey, guys!
It's maybe the first time in Happy Days history that I disliked the studio audience. Did you hear that squeal?
Yes, and it made me very uncomfortable.
But I do like that the writers have not forgotten Germaine. And it sounds like her relationship with Al is getting pretty serious.
Yeah, she was at Merlin's pub with everyone else while Arnold's was deserted. And also he mentions that he will be coming back to Milwaukee when it looks like he's about to leave forever.
Oh, yeah, I promised Germaine I'd be back for her dog's birthday.
Henry Winkler does a great bit of physical acting when he calms himself down after seeing the fire. In fact, I thought he was very good throughout this entire episode.
He is terrific throughout this episode, and he gets a lot of chances to showcase himself throughout the entire fire scene, when he's knocked himself out after trying to knock down the wall, when he's yelling at Chachi, a scene that I liked very much, when he and Al become partners. It's all good stuff. Also the scene where he's trying to pitch the idea of doing nonsensical and dangerous motorcycle stunts to bring more customers in was very funny. Very sweet, also a little bit concerning, but very funny.
Yeah, I like that his first idea for saving Arnold's is this crazy motorcycle stunt. One thing I hadn't really realized before watching this episode is what a good physical actor Henry Winkler can be. A lot of his role in Happy Days is verbal, but he's quite good at pantomime. I thought this was an excellent showcase for him. As pretty much everyone has noted, the shot of Arnold's in flames is an especially unconvincing process shot.
These effects aren't very special.
Yeah, these effects suck.
Peter, what are your thoughts on that shot of Arnold burning?
I think that they were banking on the shock of Arnold's actually getting burned down to kind of win audiences over, and that the shock would overwhelm the, that doesn't look quite right feeling.
It looks very silly, but again, you're right. The audience at home is just so shocked to see Arnold's in flames that they're not even going to notice how bad the special effect is. But the episode really glosses over the fact that Chachi's incompetence nearly killed 3 people. Ralph especially has a right to be angry since he is mere inches away from being seriously hurt or killed. This is the one note I really would have given to the writers on this episode, is that yes, Chachi's incompetence burned down the building, but he also nearly got 3 people killed, and it seems like that isn't discussed nearly enough.
When Fonzie yells at Chachi and everyone else is like, no, don't do that, Chachi feels bad enough already. Yeah, he could stand to feel a little bit worse, and he's right. Because Fonzie tried to run through a wall to get himself and Ralph and Potsy out of the burning building, and he ended up knocking himself unconscious because the wall was concrete, and he could have died. Yeah, that was a stupid thing to do, but also they were trapped in a burning building and they were going to die anyway. So he did something stupid and desperate, and he wouldn't have had to do that if Chachi hadn't ruined everything.
And there's a moment when a burning plank falls from the ceiling. And it looks like it comes about an inch away from Don Most.
Yep.
I'm surprised that that's not made a bigger deal later in the episode. They kind of all forget about that.
It does lead to a pretty cool moment when Ralph, who is the last person inside the building, just leaps out the window.
It reminded me of the scene in The Wizard of Oz when the Cowardly Lion runs down the hallway and then jumps through the plate glass window. I love that scene. I have to give the episode some credit. The set designers did a fantastic job of creating a burned up husk of Arnold's, unless they actually torched the real set, which I don't think they did.
Based on the unconvincing Arnold's burning down scene, probably not.
The interior actually looks quite convincing. It does look like a melted, scarred version of the Arnold's that we all know. The post-fire scene has so many heartbreaking details in it. Marion sweeping the floor.
Sweetheart, it's too late for that now.
Richie saying, yowza, yowza, yowza.
Yowza, yowza, yowza.
Ralph playing a few notes on the piano. Fonzie hitting the jukebox only to have the side fall off. Were there any of those moments that affected you emotionally at all?
Definitely Fonzie hitting the jukebox and it just breaking down.
I thought that was an especially poignant moment. I will credit the writer of this episode, Fred Fox Jr., for writing an emotionally effective scene following the fire. I think it should be pointed out that it was probably not Fred Fox's idea to burn down Arnold's. This was just a story that they were going to do in season 7, and it was assigned to Fred eventually.
I will say that the decision to make it Chachi's fault, I do have to wonder if that was his idea, and if it was, that is very funny.
So, Peter, I will ask, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
Sadly, no.
I can't remember a single outfit from this one. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question, was this episode any good?
Honestly, yeah. Once you get over the initial shock of Happy Days burning down its beloved teen hangout spot, this is a surprisingly solid episode. I think it manages to use its dramatic potential pretty well. There are some surprisingly funny jokes, although you are absolutely right that Chachi does not get nearly enough shit for almost killing 3 people.
When I revisited this episode for this podcast, I was surprised at how effective it was on me. I don't agree with the idea to burn down Arnold's and then rebuild it as some kind of coffee bar or whatever the heck it is in the later seasons. And I don't like the look of the new Arnold's. But I will say that this script is actually pretty effective. The entire sequence involving the fire and the escape from the fire is genuinely suspenseful and well directed. I'm going to have to give props to Jerry Paris. I think he directed this episode very well. And I liked the drama that unfolded from the revelation that it was Chachi's fault and Fonzie yelling at him and then ultimately coming to peace with this and the start of the new Arnold's. I thought Al Molinaro was pretty good here as a man just broken by this experience and then the rebuilding basically of Al himself. And as a half hour of television, Hot Stuff is actually pretty good. I can understand fans being very angry with this episode because it trashes a location that we've come to love. And I don't think it was a great long-term idea for the show. But as a standalone episode of television, Hot Stuff is surprisingly entertaining and poignant even in spots. So I can't believe this, but I'm giving a thumbs up to Hot Stuff. Are we doing this, Peter? Are we recommending the episode Hot Stuff?
I think we are.
There you have it, folks. I think we also recommended the Fonzie jumping the shark episode as well. So
We like episodes where weird stuff happens. Those are always fun.
So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, well, we destroyed Arnold's. Now all that's left to do is rebuild it as the new Arnold's.
I can hardly wait. It sounds like a good one. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a lie if I was to say to you, boy, we couldn't get much higher. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
This is your fault. You caused this.